Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to my 2025 AFL Season Predictions. It's that time of year again. Oh boy, going to be going over my ladder predictor and also some awards after it. Yeah, predictions, it's a tricky one, and no one ever gets it spot on because there's just so much uncertainty heading into a season. There's going to be teams that finish in specific places at the end of the year that we just can't fathom at the moment. So, yeah, it's very difficult, but it's always fun to do. Just give it a crack, and yeah, like to follow a few guidelines as well to try and make it as realistic as possible. Switch it up a bit. Last year was so even, very, very even. There was a massive logjam between really 4th and 12th, if we do remember, in the second half of 2024. So it's up for spots, it's up for grabs, these finals places, and who's gonna rise, who's gonna fall. Yeah, it is a pretty tricky one to try and nail with a lot of these teams. There's probably like 14, 15 teams that could genuinely push for a final spot. So yeah, I'm just going to be giving it a crack today and see how we fare towards the end of the year. So let's begin, shall we? In 18th, this comes to not really much surprise at all. Gonna have to go with the Richmond Tigers here. I think they are almost a certainty to be the wooden spoon team for 2025 once again. Stripped a lot of experience off their list from 2024 with the likes of Shea Bolton and also Baker, and also Jack Graham leaving the club with a few retirees like Marlon Pickett, Dusty Martin. They drafted a lot of youngsters, and I think that's just what the Tigers fans want to see this year. Some good development in those young players. Look, they're aside from Melbourne. They have a lot of games at the G. I feel like they'll find ways to pinch a few close games. Like, look at the Swans last year. I can't see them going winless for 2025. I think, yeah, there'll be a thorn in some good team side, but it's hard to see them really get out of the bottom two. Let's brew here with a very young team. So plenty of learnings to come and pretty long year I think it's going to be for Richmond. Got them for 18th. In 17th now, I'm going to be going with the West Coast Eagles. Yeah, pretty comfortable with this bottom two. I think West Coast have one of the worst lists in the competition. They did recruit nice though, bringing across the likes of Liam Baker and Jack Graham across from the Tigers. Matt Owies to add in that forward half alongside Jamie Cripps. Noah Long coming back in, like the look of him. That could give them a bit of a dynamic edge in the forward line, but you know, with Barras leaving the club, feel like they could be hurt a little bit defensively. Will Harry Edwards really come along this year? They need to keep those experienced players fit, like McGovern, All-Australian, Waterman, All-Australian, 𝐓𝐴. Can he be consistent out there on the park too? Because when they've had the full-strength side, they've been pretty good in the trenches. But the big issue with ladder predictions is you look at the other teams in the competition, I just think they are a bit ahead of the Eagles. But to be fair, they've been a few years in the rebuild. They could shock a few teams in the competition. But just with my gut feel like they'll be around the bottom three range again for 2025. In 16th now, I'm going to be going with North Melbourne here. It's pretty low-hanging fruit having the exact same bottom three from last season. But I just have to see it to believe it first, to be fair with North Melbourne. It's just hard to see who goes below them in 2025. They had 3 wins last year, so if you just look at the wins column, I think they can get a lot more than 3, push for 6 to 8. If that's the case, they'll still roughly be in the bottom 4. They recruited really well, bringing across some experience, Luke Parker, to mentor those young midfielders. Caleb Daniel, bit of dash across half-back, and also Jack Darling held that 1-2 punch fair with 𝐼𝐴𝐴𝐿𝐼𝐶𝐾. I think they'll continue to be a lot more competitive for longer in games like they showed a bit last year. The defence is a big one for me for North Melbourne. They can put on some big scores. They showed that last year, but geez, they leaked a lot of points. So could the likes of Charlie Combinating Core really gel that back line? They're an interesting team, North Melbourne. I'd love to see them go up the ladder in 2025, but just have my doubts about them. Do they have enough? Do they have the assets? Do they have the winning culture? I feel like it's more of the mental side as well when looking at the Kangas. Can they get a lot more of those wins and push up? But for me, I've got them in 16th. And to round out the bottom 4 in 15th here, I'm going to be going with St Kilda. Just this one doesn't really sit too well with me. They finished off the year very well, but heading into the new year with just a handful of personnel issues does worry me a little bit. With Dougal Howard out for the start of the year, Max King's another one that's out, and also Philippu's the big one too. There's just a bit of unknown on will they have the key position stocks at either end of the ground to really fill in the void. Also Josh Battle leaving, who I thought was such a crucial player for them. They've now transitioned to one of the more younger teams in the competition to the Saints. So with the young side, there just is a bit of yeah, a bit of doubtfulness creeping into them for me, St Kilda. The midfield's just still a bit of a concern for me. I know they brought in Jack Macrae, but they just need a bit of X-factor, a bit of power in there. And they just don't score enough as well, those Saints. They need to become more of a damaging team. They just still have games, don't put on enough points. But if all the things come to the fore, they could be one that shocks the comp a little bit, St Kilda. But yeah, the personnel issues and just also the young list now, I just feel like they will have an inconsistent year and finish in the bottom 4. Moving out of the bottom 4 into 14th, I'm going with the Gold Coast Suns here. Just like North Melbourne, I just have to see it to believe it with the Suns. If there are any chance of pushing up and playing finals football, they're just so inconsistent for me. They've got a very exciting young list and some young quality players coming through. So almost you can use that as a justified point to say, well, they might have a bit of another slow year. But as Damien Hardwick says, they just got to grow the F up. They are a talented team that should be playing and should be pushing for top 8. The big issue for me, though, with the Suns is not only their inconsistency or inability to play well away from home, but just their connection and chemistry still feels so ordinary when watching them play. They have to, do the absolute maximum to kick a goal, and their inside 50 injuries can be poor for games, and it was what cost them a lot of results last year. But the midfielders' quality, they've got some good names in that back half, underrated names, Ballard and Collins and also Ewell. There's questions on their key forwards, though. Can Walter and King really shine through and become more consistent, especially more on King? Just have my doubts about the Suns. Feel like this could be another year where they have some great wins but have some shocking losses at the same time. So I'm going to see it to believe it with Gold Coast. I've got them 14th. In 13th now, I'm going to be going with Essendon here. They're a massive enigma for me in 2025. Their best football does stack up. Their pre-season performances was pretty impressive. They looked efficient, had some nice performances from some of those younger players. But it's just the longevity for me with the Dons. Are they good enough? Will they be good enough for long enough? They're one that could really shock the competition, and even I still feel like they are genuinely a bit of a final smoky. If they keep some of those important players fit out there like Redmond and also Ridley in the back half. Players like Caldwell and Doma I think can really improve their game. They've showed a bit last year. They were one of the better clearance teams in the competition throughout patches of the year. The big one for me with Essendon though is efficiency in the forward half. Bring more forward pressure, which they lacked a bit last year, and they just had some games where their inside 50 efficiency was just terrible. So need to put on some big scores, become more of a damaging team, and I think they could push on. But sort of remind me of Gold Coast with just their ball use and connection and chemistry when playing out there can really let them down. So for a 24 round point of view, just still have my doubts about the Dons, so I've got them 13th. Moving on to 12th position now, there is a side in the top 8 usually every year that pushes down into the bottom 8 range, 12th or below. So going to go with the Bulldogs here. Now, it's a very long season. I just don't like to say, they're going to finish here because of just only injuries. But it's just still, even if they have a full strength list out there, there's just so many questions on the Dogs where one game they'll look superb. They look like their midfields are the best in the competition. And then they'll have other games where they're just ghosts, they're non-existent. Their bottom 6 players don't show enough. Just as a team defence, they struggle and they concede a lot of points. It's just one way or the other of the Dogs. They look great one week, poor the other week. Inconsistencies just worry me again for this side in 2025. And on top of that, the injuries they do have to start the year. They could start off a little bit sluggish. Then they've got a massive reliance on players like Rory Lobb to try and hold down the fort with Jones out. What could push them for finals though, if they get a massive year out of some of those key forwards, Norton and Darcy, could those two punch on and combine for a lot of goals this year? They've still got a talented team, very dynamic forward half, and midfield, when on its day, can be very powerful. Yeah, definitely a team that's good enough to make top 8, but there's just got to be teams slipping down. And I just feel like the Dogs' inconsistencies and, the personnel issues so far worry me a little bit, so have them 12th. On to 11th place now, going to be going with the Melbourne Football Club, leaning towards more of the side of regenerating their list, blooding a lot more of those younger players. A few of those important players like Stephen May, Max Gawn getting another year older, so durability could become a bit of a concern. I feel like they've still got a huge reliance on those key players, so if they are to get injured again, well, that could put them in a bit of strife. The contested stuff and turnover game was pretty bland last year, so that's got to get back to their best if they want to see any improvement. This is definitely a year, though, I could see Melbourne get some nice revelations from a few of those young players. Harvey Langford, I think it's definitely on the cards for him to play every game, push for a Rising Star nomination. Caleb Windsor's also another to take his game to the next level. But ultimately, though, just still feel like they've got so much reliance on those key players, and the depth, it's a little bit bare. They did have Neil Bullen leave the club too. Their forward 50 injuries have just been poor the last few seasons. There's just a lot of questions on Melbourne for me on are they enough to be a side that returns to the top 8. So I think they'll have another more inconsistent year and finish mid-table in 11th. Moving on to 10th, there is a team every single year that's in the top 4, then the very next season they drop out of the 8, and I think for 2025 it's going to be the GWS Giants. This one feels a little bit iffy because I still think they are a very talented team and they're a well-balanced side. They're tough. They've got great high-pressure football. But you just have to do this prediction sometimes. Be a bit harsh on some teams, and I think the Giants will drop out of the 8. On the other side, with personnel issues, the Tom Green is going to miss the first few weeks. And, alongside that, 𝐼𝐞 𝐎𝐥𝐝, I feel like he's slowing down a little bit with a delayed pre-season, with an operation he did have. Their depth's going to be really tested. Peatling coming, and also Perryman left the club, so someone like a James Leake really needs to come in and have a good year, or someone like a Harry Ralston, he was good in his first season, could he really make a name in there too? Briggs is also with another delayed pre-season. A few of their core plays just have question marks, and look, both ends of the ground, I think they're in good order, and they're a side that should be pushing for finals 40 and competing, but usually that sort of 7 to 12 range can sometimes eventuate only being 1 or 2 games of difference, so I think they'll be around the mark, the Giants, but might just miss out. But they just feel like they're going to be a bit more of a vulnerable team, the Giants. Still have questions on that midfield, so yeah, for me, the Giants going to have them slipping down and missing finals in 10th. And now for the dreaded 9th place here. It isn't fun putting any team here, but it's got to be done. I'm going with Carlton. Harsh one this feels like, because they were in the top 4 for most of the season, it felt like last year, and then they had the injuries. They are one of the more better contested sides in the competition, so that as a very strong foundation does make me think I can't really see them anywhere lower than 12th. Their contested stuff can be some of the best in the competition when it's on. The questions are, though, that sort of, the role players, the bottom 6 players, can they really carry the load? Their ball movement and their turnover game's the big one. Some games look great, the other weeks it just looked poor. I've really got to nail that ball movement and turnover game. I think if that improves, should be locking them in for finals, but just have my doubts with inconsistencies. They do have that pretty heavy reliance on core plays, and past that, there just is a bit of a gulf between their best, 6 and the rest of their best 18 or best 22. I think Nick Newman's a massive out for them in terms of their ball movement and drive, so can 𝐼𝐶 really be the answer? Again, similar to the Giants, it's a team that I just feel like should be playing finals footy, but it's just a logjam usually around this sort of range of the ladder, so I think they'll just miss out, and I have them in 9th. Now for the top 8, in 8th place I'm going with the Adelaide Crows. I think they'll play finals footy for the first time since 2017. Their pre-season has looked impressive, and I feel like you've just got to overrate some teams, pushing them into finals for a ladder prediction, and I feel like that is the Crows, because I still have questions on them defensively a little bit. They're inexperienced and they can be inconsistent a bit with their ball movement, and if they really get that right, the Fortress of Adelaide Oval too, I think they've had a really strong pre-season, addressing some great needs. Neil Bullen's a very diligent player. I think Peatling and Cumming will bring something. Peatling, another addition to that midfield. He's hard-nosed. Cumming can float back and have some nice ball use too. The forward half could be revitalised if someone like 𝐼𝐶 𝐿𝐴𝐴𝐵 has a breakout year. Don't count out the Texan too. Did say the defence is the bit of the shakier one, but it does look promising. Like Joshua, I think, so underrated. Max Michaelani's turning into a premier small defender of the competition year in, year out. Could go to the next level. Dawson with the injury-free pre-season. He could be back in All-Australian conversations. Rank and lock him in for the All-Australian if he's fully injury-free for the year. Another question is Matty Nicks. He just feels like he's the ball and chain, sort of wearing down this team a little bit. There's just a lot of pressure on the Crows, but I think they're talented. I think they can bring back an exciting brand, and they underachieved so much last year. There is a side in the bottom 7 from the previous season that makes the jump to the top 8, and out of that bottom 7 from last year, I just think the Crows, given they underachieved so much, have a lot of upside. So I've got them playing finals for 2025. Moving on to 7th place now, and I'm going to be going with here the Port Adelaide Football Club. So both SA teams will be making finals football. As soon as I heard the news about Hinkley hanging over the reins at the end of the season, I'm like, yeah, this team will have one more crack, I think, with Ken. And they've just been a very consistent final side this whole decade. We know about their vulnerabilities at either end of the ground. They can be a bit shaky. The loss of Houston, I think, is massive, but Logan Evans showed quite a bit when he did get picked up in the second half of the year. The midfield, for me, it's just one of the best in the competition. And for a 24-round point of view, they just find ways to win, and they just tick the boxes. They're a very good home and away side. They're a bit of that flat track bully side, to be fair, as well. They do beat up on those sort of lower ranked sides. The Adelaide Oval is a very tough home field advantage for opposition sides as well. The additions they've made in the forward line, I think, are really underrated. Joe Berry, they drafted him. Could he show something in his first year? I think Joe Richards could really get going out to the likes of Willie Rioli with their small forward department. And with the loss of Dixon, they might actually not dump it on someone like him anymore. They could be a little bit neater inside 50. So, yeah, I think they'll play finals football. But, yeah, it's just such an even comp. So I feel like they were beatable last year. So I think they'll slip down the ladder a little bit and be around that sort of 5 to 10 range. And I've got them in 7th. Moving on now to 6th place. I'm going to be going with the Sydney Swans here. This one just feels pretty safe for me. I know they did get belted in the grand final last year. Oh, no, sorry, I didn't know that. Yes, did you know they got belted in the grand final? Usually when that happens, as we've said 1,000 times, you can struggle the next year, but they still have one of the more stronger lists in the competition, and I feel like it's sort of now going to be water coming off the duck's back because they experienced that in 2022. They made finals the year after, but playing great footy in the back half of 2023, and they were one of the benchmarks in 2024, and I feel like they will slide down a bit, back towards the pack a little bit this year, the Swannies, though. Bit of undoubt on how Dean Cox will go, the first-year coach, but he's been in the club for quite some time. I think he'll go pretty swell. Recording this on Saturday morning, by the way, so still don't know about Errol Good and what's happening with him, but it looks like he could be out for a little bit. That is a huge out, but still, with 𝐓𝐡𝐞 and also Warner through there, just their ball movement and turnover game and their front half game, it stacks up. It's some of the best in the comp. I feel like they'll drop off a little bit, like the depth in the defensive areas is a little bit of a concern, but just like Port Adelaide and a few other teams in the comp, you just know you can back them in to have enough wins and tick the boxes to qualify for finals. So I've got the Swannies in 6th. For 5th place now, it's a bit of a big call here because it feels like everything has to go right for this team given the circumstances they have. It's Collingwood. They have the oldest list in the AFL for 2025, and there's a lot of mixed options and mixed opinions on this team. I feel like Collingwood could be like that team that either makes top 4 or misses out completely. They've gone chips in. I think they've had a really strong off-season. The acquisitions of Perryman and Houston have been fantastic. I think will be great. And people say for the sake of it, because they've gone to Collingwood, or, it's overhyped signing. But I think Houston is perfect, a perfect addition for their game. Alongside Josh Dacos moving back into defence, could that revitalise their ball movement? I think it could. It was a bit of a letdown last year, and also defensively they were well beaten. Loss of Nathan Murphy is still a big one, so could someone like Reef McInnes be the answer to at least try and plug the gap there? The midfield depth still a bit of a concern, but when you've got Nick Dacos on your list, I think you'll be okay. He's just an absolute superstar, but they need players like 𝐓𝐿𝐴 fit at the absolute minimum if they want to be up here. So it's a bit of a risk. Like, if they do get injuries, they're very prone to this, the Pies, with the players they have on their team. They could slide out of the 8 once again. I just think with the additions they've brought in, and they can just really get back to their best, a bit of a refresh, a reset, bring that ball movement back, tighten up that team defence as well. I think the Pies can return back into contention, and I've got them just outside the top 4 in 5th. And now for the top 4. Got some changes in here for 2025. And 4th, I'm going Hawthorn. Very, very, very overhyped team. I think we can safely say that. I think everybody can agree with that. They are getting a lot of media hype, but I still look at Hawthorn and it's just a struggle to find much of a weakness with their list, apart from the key forward issues. Now, that could be a bit of an issue, especially at the start of the year with Mitch Lewis still not on the team. And is 𝐬𝐿 the man to really guide this team or be a key player towards premiership hopes? There's still questions on that, but we know they're small forwards, some of the best in the business, which fits perfectly in the modern day AFL game. You need to have good smalls. It feels like they're more important than the tools to beating flags and etc. But just how they were able to bounce back from last year, and the numbers just stacked up so well against some of the best teams in the competition. Their ground level game was great. Just how they moved the footy so well, so fluidly. A very high morale side, played with a lot of confidence, and I think they'll carry over in 2025, but not entirely. Like, just because you make top 4 doesn't mean you have to be the best team all year or be so highly consistent. Look at last year. I mean, look at even the Swans in 2022. They started off quite patchy, but sometimes it just takes a 7 or 8 week period in the second half of the year, winning every single game, and then you really get going and you just ride that momentum wave and make top 4. I think that'll be the Hawks. They might start off a little bit sluggish, but they're a side that I think could really see them peaking at the right time of the season. They're exciting to watch. They've acquired well in the off-season, improving that defence with the likes of Barras and Battle. The young midfield gets another year older in the system. For me, this is a side that will play top 4 or be thereabouts to compete. It's just hard to see a team so exciting and just such high morale miss out. So, yeah, Hawks top 4. And now for 3rd place, we're going with another team that I've been getting around since the end of last year, and that's Fremantle. I think they can make the big jump into the top 4, and they just have to. They have to have success this year with the list they've got, such a brilliant young core, and they've got talented players at either end of the ground. This just has to be a year where they strive for consistency and they make top 4. Always a team outside the 8 as well that does push into the top 4, so I think that will be Fremantle. They honestly could have made top 4 last year, but they did slide down a little bit with the injuries they did have to the likes of Josh Tracy and etc. But speaking of him, I think he's one that could really go bang alongside the 1-2 punch of a miss, join and combine for a lot of goals. Midfield, just talented. Caleb Sarong, Andy Brayshaw, did they get a bit of a resurgence again from Nat Fife? Erasmus or Johnson or even Nathan or Driscoll, could one of them really up their numbers this season? I think they've got a pretty strong team defence, which is a strong foundation to have if you want to be a successful football team, no doubt. Yes, their coach is Justin Longmuir, and similar to Adelaide, he's probably another one of those coaches under a lot of pressure, and there's a bit of doubt on, is the coaching going to be the aspect that lets them down if Freo are going to be a potential top 4 side? It perhaps could, but the acquisitions they have brought in of Shea Bolton, like, that's just the perfect addition into that forward half. If that can become a much more damaging front half game, a lot more consistently, which I think they can, with just the talent they've got on that list, this is, I think, a year where all the strengths come to the fore and they play top 4 footy. For second place here, going pretty safe, just because this ladder prediction is hard to lock in these top 4 spots. So I'm going to go with 2 safe ones here. The Brisbane Lions for seconds. Now, I've been thinking about this so long, all pre-season. There's been 2 sides to the story for me for Lions. There's the one side where the monkeys finally off the back. You know, there's a side that's been under so much pressure to finally win the flag, and now they've done it. So since that pressure is elevated off them, it's like, okay, now we've got the confidence, let's go again. One of the strongest lists in the competition, with players coming back like Tom Doedee. They'll get in Levi Ashcroft as well, and Kitty Coleman, and you know, there's also Gardner too, and Lincoln McCarthy. Geez, like, you'd think they'll be top 4 again, but then there's the other side where it's like, well, you know, there's going to be a lot of players underdone heading into the opening round. There was a few players with off-season injuries too, delayed pre-season, and there is now maybe the other side of it, thinking, well, we finally won the flag. That's now sort of the expectation rose off them. So because of that, I think that could be also a bit more of a vulnerable team. But they're just such a safe team to have in the top 6 at least, the Lions, because they're very hard to beat at home. Just, you know, off the back of a premiership, I think I'm leaning towards more the first side. Just, I think off the back of that flag, they'll give them confidence to contend once again. And they just have such a mature list with talented players across all sides of the ground. The clearance game is great. They move the ball so well. Great at home, as I just said. Yeah, I feel pretty confident locking them into the top 4. But I did want to address that second point, because that could potentially come to reality if they turn out to struggle a bit this year. But yeah, Lions second for me. Which leaves first place going with the Geelong Football Club. I've addressed this so many times already, but this is a very tricky year to lock in a minor premier or even the top 4. There's just so many pros and cons for any team, and probably the top 8 I have to put as the minor premiers. But I just think Geelong, similar to Brisbane, a safe team to have. They're always up there. They're just such a consistent side. And off the back of that prelim final for last year, I think they'll get some fire in the bellies. It shows that the list they have, I think it's good enough to compete. They did have Tom Hawkins retire, and Tui also retire as well. So those are holes in there to fill, but with Lawson Humphreys and Shannon Neal, could he really get going? And this could really allow Jeremy Cameron to have a superb season once again too. One thing that must be said though, I feel like they still got a massive reliance on Paddy Dangerfield, so he needs to be raring to go. Could he be a player that probably plays a little bit more forward? If there any chance of the minor premiership, he needs to have an impactful and, for the most part, an injury-free year. Bailey Smith, a good acquisition I feel too, will just add a nice dynamic edge into that midfield. He's a really hard-running player. Yes, he's a bit overrated, but the Cats know how to get the best out of players, and I think they can certainly do that with Bailey Smith. Well-drilled, well-coached side. The Smalls are dangerous too. Play good, very situation-based footy. Yeah, it's a team that will be up there, I think, in 2025, the Geelong Cats. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is my ladder prediction for 2025. Let me know down below in the comments. Always a pretty heavily debated video, these ones. But I'll always like to go in depth with each team and give some justified points on why I think they'll finish in position X or position Y. But as I said at the start of the video, no one ever gets predictions spot on, because there's going to be teams that finish in specific places that we just can't think it's possible at the moment. You know, there could be North Melbourne that makes finals. Who really knows? There's just a lot of doubt that creeps into the season every year, and it was such an even one last year too. So there's going to be plenty of change, I feel. Let's now quickly go go over to the awards. Nice little transition there, I know. What can I say? Editing master. Anyways, the Brownlow, the Coleman, and the Rising Star. Don't need to really go in depth with these ones. I think you just got to pick an elite player and you're halfway there. As I always say, Brownlow, I'm just going to keep on backing this guy, and especially with the injuries that I've unfurled, going to go with 𝐚ick 𝐎𝐥𝐝. I just think this guy's an absolute superstar. I've said it countless times on the channel. His awareness, spatial awareness, I should say, his kicking, he just a very hard play to tackle too. He finds the goal so well, natural kick. Yeah, he's going to have a superb season. I think he'll take home Charlie. Then with the Coleman medal, I did sort of talk about this guy in the Geelong segment. I think Cameron's in for a big year. Hawkins retiring. I think Shannon Neal will be an honest player, but Jez is going to be that guy. High up the ground, kick some lovely goals, and just outwork his direct opponent. He showed that a bit against the Dons. He does it so well. I think he's in for a big year. And then for the Rising Star, talked about this guy also in the ladder predictions. Watch out for Harvey Langford. I think the Rising Star is so more about consistency in a play rather than who's the most talented. Now, he is one of the most talented, Harvey Langford, but I just think this guy can be one of the more consistent first-year players because he's a big body. He just plays so strong. He's aggressive with ball in hand. I think he'll fit into Melbourne really nicely and play hopefully almost every game this year. So I think he's a great chance for the Rising Star, Harvey Langford. So there's my awards, which is now the end of today's video, everybody. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments with my predictions. It's always a fun video. So yeah, just try and keep things civil in the comments below, okay? As I've said, and as you've watched the channel before, I always like to keep pretty neutral on things. I don't like to have much of a bias. I just love watching footy, and I hope the best for every single team this season. That's it from me, everybody, and until next time, I'll talk to you later. See you later, fellas.